patricians and plebeians, we create Lord Saturninus, Rome's great emperor.
Gladiators, emperors, chariot races, political assassination, slave revolts, and enough toga-wearing drama to fill 1,000 movie screens. The Roman Empire was, without question, the greatest story the ancient world ever produced, and Hollywood has been trying to do it justice ever since the very first cameras started rolling. Hi, my name is Max, and this is Top Movies, the channel where we rank, celebrate, and obsess over the greatest films ever made. Today we are counting down the 20 best ancient Rome movies of all time, and I promise you, this list has everything. 20th place, The Last Legion, 2007. Kicking off our list at 20th place is The Last Legion, a film that I have a genuine soft spot for, even though I fully acknowledge it is not exactly a cinematic masterpiece. Directed by Doug Leffler and based on Valerio Massimo Manfredi's novel, the film is set in the dying days of the Western Roman Empire and follows the young emperor Romulus Augustus, the very last emperor of Rome, as he escapes captivity with the help of a fiercely loyal general played by Colin Firth. Yes, Colin Firth, in armor, swinging a sword. I know, it is a lot to process. Together with a mysterious warrior, played by the luminous Aishwarya Rai, they journey to Britain in search of Julius Caesar's legendary sword and the last surviving Roman legion. The history here is loose, the plot is pulpy, and the film wears its adventure movie heart proudly on its sleeve. But what The Last Legion captures genuinely well is the melancholy of an empire in its final death throes, the sadness of a civilization that once bestrode the world, reduced to a handful of desperate survivors fleeing into the base, darkness at the edge of the known world. It is entertaining, it is heartfelt, and Colin Firth in a breastplate is something the world deserved to see at least once. 19th place, Titus, 1999. 19th place goes to one of the most visually audacious and emotionally ferocious ancient Rome films ever made. Julie Taymor's Titus is an adaptation of Shakespeare's earliest and bloodiest tragedy, Titus Andronicus, and it stars Anthony Hopkins in the title role as a Roman general whose family is consumed by a cycle of revenge so brutal and so relentless that it makes most modern action films look timid by comparison. Taymor's direction is genuinely unlike anything else on this list. She blends ancient Roman imagery with surrealist anachronisms, motorcycles alongside chariots, fascist aesthetics alongside classical architecture, creating a film that feels simultaneously ancient and disturbingly modern. The message is clear and it is uncomfortable. Human cruelty does not belong to any single era. Anthony Hopkins, fresh from his iconic work as Hannibal Lecter, brings devastating authority to Titus, a man of absolute dignity being stripped of everything he loves until nothing remains but grief and a terrible, consuming rage. Jessica Lange matches him beat for beat as the villainous Tamora. Titus is not comfortable viewing. It was never meant to be, but as a piece of pure cinematic courage that uses the ancient world to say something permanent and painful about human nature, it is extraordinary. 18th place, The Fall of the Roman Empire, 1964. At 18th place, we have one of the most criminally underappreciated epics of Hollywood's golden age. Anthony Mann's The Fall of the Roman Empire is a sweeping, intelligent, and genuinely moving film that asks a question that remains urgently relevant today: what happens when a great civilization begins to rot from the inside? Starring Stephen Boyd, Sophia Loren, Alec Guinness as the philosopher Emperor Marcus Aurelius, and James Mason as the statesman Timonides, the film follows the power struggle that erupts after Marcus Aurelius dies, and his unstable son Commodus seizes control of the empire. The cast alone is almost unfairly stacked. The production design is breathtaking, with a recreation of the Roman Forum built at full scale that reportedly remains one of the largest sets ever constructed for a motion picture. But what truly sets this film apart is its intellectual seriousness. Mann is not interested in simply dazzling you with spectacle. He wants to explore how empires die through vanity, corruption, division, and the failure of good people to act in time. Sound familiar? Here is a fun footnote. This film covers almost identical historical territory to Gladiator, which arrived 36 years later. Ridley Scott has openly acknowledged its influence. Consider this the essential original. 17th place, Demetrius and the Gladiators, 1954. 17th place goes to Demetrius and the Gladiators, a film that understands exactly what it is and absolutely commits to being the best possible version of that thing. Directed by Delmer Daves and serving as a direct sequel to The Robe, which appears considerably higher on this list, the film brings back Victor Mature as Demetrius, the Greek slave and devout follower of Christ, who finds his faith shattered when the people he loves are taken from him. In his grief and rage, he abandons his convictions and becomes one of the most feared gladiators in Rome, fighting under the watchful eye of the increasingly erratic Emperor Caligula, played with wonderful theatrical menace by J. Robinson. Where The Robe was restrained and spiritually contemplative, Demetrius leans fully into the arena. The gladiatorial sequences are genuinely exciting for a film produced in 1954, crackling with physical energy and tension. Victor Mature is surprisingly effective at conveying a man whose inner life is in complete collapse, even as his outer strength reaches its peak. It is a film about faith lost and faith found, wrapped in the most entertaining possible package of sand, sweat, and swords. They truly do not make films like this anymore, and that is cinema's loss. 16th place, Quo Vadis, 1951. 16th place belongs to Mervyn LeRoy's Quo Vadis, one of the grandest and most influential Roman epics Hollywood ever produced, and a film that essentially invented the template that every sword and sandal epic of the following 2 decades would follow. Set during the reign of the Emperor Nero, one of history's most spectacularly terrible leaders, which is saying something given the competition. The film follows a Roman military commander, Marcus Vinicius, played by Robert Taylor, who falls in love with a Christian woman named Lygia, played by Deborah Kerr, just as Nero's violent persecution of early Christians reaches its most savage peak. The film is enormous in scale, thousands of extras, massive sets, a recreation of burning Rome that remains one of the most spectacular sequences in Golden Age Hollywood. But the real reason to watch Quo Vadis is Peter Ustinov's performance as Nero, which is so magnificently, operatically unhinged that it threatens to collapse the entire film under the sheer weight of its own theatrical brilliance. Ustinov earned an Academy Award nomination and utterly deserved it. Every scene he appears in, you cannot look at anyone else. Quo Vadis was one of the biggest box office hits of 1951 and proved definitively that audiences had an enormous and genuine appetite for ancient Rome on screen. Without it, the entire genre as we know it simply does not exist. 15th place, Julius Caesar, 1953. At 15th place, we have Joseph L. Mankiewicz's Julius Caesar, a film that proves with absolute authority that you do not need thundering battle sequences or vast spectacle to make a truly great Roman epic. All you need is Shakespeare's language, a cast of extraordinary actors who know precisely what to do with it, and the wisdom to stay out of the way and let both do their work. The cast assembled for this production is genuinely staggering. Marlon Brando as Mark Antony, James Mason as Brutus, John Gielgud as the razor-tongued Cassius, and Louis Calhern as Julius Caesar himself. Brando, still riding the cultural shockwave of A Streetcar Named Desire, and just beginning to redefine what screen acting could be, delivers a performance as Mark Antony that remains one of the finest pieces of film acting of the entire 1950s. His funeral oration, Friends, Romans, Countrymen, is a masterclass in controlled emotional escalation, a performance so carefully constructed and yet so alive in the moment that it feels genuinely dangerous, even on a 10th viewing. The film won the Academy Award for Best Art Direction and received a Best Picture nomination. By modern standards, it is deliberately paced and deeply theatrical. By any standard, it is magnificent. 14th place, Caligula, 1979. 14th place. I need to take a breath before we talk about this one. Caligula is, and I mean this as both a compliment and a warning, one of the most genuinely strange films ever produced by human beings with access to professional equipment. What began as a serious historical drama written by the brilliant Gore Vidal, directed by Tinto Brass, and starring Malcolm McDowell as Rome's most infamously depraved emperor, became something far more complicated when Penthouse magazine founder Bob Guccione secretly filmed extensive explicit scenes after the main production wrapped and spliced them into the final cut without the knowledge or approval of the director, the writer, or most of the cast. The result is a film that exists in a category entirely its own. And yet here is the thing, Malcolm McDowell's performance at the center of all this chaos is genuinely remarkable. Beneath every layer of the film's notorious excess, there is a portrait of absolute power corroding a human mind that is chilling, magnetic, and deeply unsettling. Helen Mirren brings fierce intelligence to her role. Peter O'Toole is mesmerizing, in a brief but indelible appearance as the dying Emperor Tiberius. John Gielgud is, as always, immaculate. Caligula is not a film for everyone. It is emphatically not a film for everyone, but it belongs on this list because nothing else in the ancient Rome genre comes remotely close to it, and that counts for something. 13th place, The Eagle, 2011. 13th place goes to Kevin McDonald's The Eagle, a lean, quietly gripping, and genuinely atmospheric adventure built around one of Roman history's most enduring mysteries. Around 117 AD, the Roman 9th Legion marched north into the uncharted wilds of Scotland and was never seen again. No bodies, no survivors, no Eagle standard recovered. Just silence where 5,000 soldiers used to be. Channing Tatum stars as Marcus Aquila, a young Roman officer driven by the need to restore his disgraced father's honor, who ventures beyond Hadrian's Wall into hostile Caledonian territory to recover the 9th Legion's lost golden eagle. His only companion is his slave Esca, played with controlled intensity by Jamie Bell, whose loyalties are quietly, fascinatingly complicated throughout the film. What The Eagle gets right that many far larger productions miss entirely is the texture of Roman frontier life. The discipline, the cold, the fear, the loneliness of soldiers posted at the absolute edge of the known world, staring into a darkness that the maps simply describe as unknown. The evolving relationship between Tatum and Bell gives the film its beating emotional heart. It is understated, unhurried, and genuinely rewarding for patient viewers willing to meet it on its own terms. 12th place, Antony and Cleopatra, 1972. 12th place belongs to Charlton Heston's Antony and Cleopatra, a film that Heston not only starred in, but also directed and co-wrote, which is either an act of tremendous creative ambition or a catastrophic logistical challenge. And in this particular case, it is honestly both simultaneously. Based on Shakespeare's great tragedy of love and empire, the film follows the passionate and ultimately doomed relationship between Mark Antony, once the most powerful military man in the world, and Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, as their personal devotion to each other collides with the cold, calculating ambitions of Octavian, the future Emperor Augustus, who has neither the time nor the patience for sentiment. Heston is commanding in the title role, bringing his trademark physical authority and emotional directness to a man being gradually, irreversibly undone by love and pride, and the cruel passage of time. Hildegard Neal plays Cleopatra with genuine fire and political intelligence, holding her own opposite one of Hollywood's most formidable presences. The film was largely overshadowed on release by the memory of the 1963 Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor, which you will find 2 spots below this on our list, but taken entirely on its own terms. Heston's version is a sincere, ambitious, and often deeply moving engagement with one of the ancient world's greatest tragic love stories. 11th place, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum, 1966. 11th place, and I am putting this here, and I will defend this decision with every breath in my body. Richard Lester's A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Forum is not just a great comedy, it is a great film, full stop. And anyone who dismisses it because it features pratfalls and show tunes has fundamentally misunderstood what cinema is allowed to be. Based on the enormously successful Broadway musical, the film stars Zero Mostel as Pseudolus, a cunning Roman slave who will do absolutely anything to win his freedom, including helping his hopelessly romantic young master secure the girl of his dreams, who unfortunately belongs to the pompous soldier next door. Phil Silvers is magnificently scheming as a rival slave dealer. Michael Crawford, years before he became the Phantom of the Opera, is wonderfully hapless as the lovesick hero. And Buster Keaton, appearing in one of his final film roles, brings the full weight of his legendary comic genius to every scene he inhabits. Zero Mostel himself is simply a force of nature, funny, warm, anarchic, and completely irresistible. Here is a fact worth knowing. The ancient Romans loved comedy. Playwrights like Plautus and Terence were producing brilliantly funny farces 2,000 years ago, and this film is directly adapted from stories they inspired. Something for everyone, as the opening number cheerfully promises. and it absolutely, joyfully delivers. 10th place Pompeii, 2014. 10th place goes to Paul W.S. Anderson's Pompeii, and I will be completely honest with you, I enjoyed writing this entry considerably more than certain film critics enjoyed watching the film, and I think those critics were wrong. Set in the days immediately preceding the catastrophic eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD, the film follows Milo, a Celtic slave who has risen to become a celebrated gladiator, played by Kit Harington, yes, Jon Snow himself, trading one brutal world for another, who falls into a desperate and forbidden love with the daughter of a wealthy Pompeian merchant, while also locked in a deadly rivalry with a corrupt Roman senator, played by Kiefer Sutherland, who appears to be having the absolute time of his professional life. Nobody is going to argue that Pompeii is reaching for Shakespearean heights. It is a disaster epic wrapped around a gladiatorial romance, and it knows exactly what it is. But the film earns its place on this list for two reasons. First, the eruption sequence in the final act is genuinely, overwhelmingly spectacular, chaotic, and terrifying, and relentlessly kinetic in ways that do real justice to the scale of that ancient catastrophe. Second, the historical detail drawn from Pompeii's extraordinary archaeological record gives the film a grounding authenticity that elevates it consistently above pure popcorn territory. The streets, the houses, the social hierarchy, it all feels real. And when Vesuvius finally blows, that reality makes everything hit considerably harder. 9th place Barabbas, 1961. 9th place goes to a film that is profoundly, persistently underappreciated in conversations about the great Roman epics. And that is a genuine injustice that I intend to spend the next 3 minutes correcting. Richard Fleischer's Barabbas, based on the Nobel Prize-winning novel by Swedish author Per Lagerkvist, is one of the darkest, most serious, and most emotionally devastating films ever set in the ancient world. Anthony Quinn stars as Barabbas, the man released by Pontius Pilate at the demand of the Jerusalem crowd in place of Jesus Christ, and the film follows his long, tormented, and deeply confused life in the decades after that moment. Barabbas did not ask to be saved. He does not understand what it means. And that guilt and bewilderment haunts every frame of the film as he passes through slavery, the silver mines, and eventually the gladiatorial arena in Rome. Quinn is magnificent, raw, physically overwhelming, and emotionally exposed in ways that the epic genre rarely demanded of its leading men. The film was shot under genuinely extraordinary production circumstances, including a real total solar eclipse captured on camera during the crucifixion sequence, a decision that gives that scene an eerie, unearthly authenticity that no amount of money or technology could manufacture. Barabbas is uncompromising, haunting, and magnificent. Find it, watch it, thank me later. 8th place Cleopatra, 1963. 8th place belongs to one of the most legendary productions in the history of Hollywood, and legendary here carries a meaning that extends far beyond the film itself. Joseph L. Mankiewicz's Cleopatra, starring Elizabeth Taylor in the title role, alongside Richard Burton as Mark Antony and Rex Harrison as Julius Caesar, nearly destroyed 20th Century Fox as a functioning studio. It went so catastrophically over budget and over schedule that it consumed resources on a scale that had studio executives genuinely questioning whether the company would survive. It sparked the most famous real-life love affair in Hollywood history between its two lead actors. It was the most expensive film ever produced at the time of its release. All of that backstory is extraordinary. But here is what matters most on this list. The film itself is genuinely, undeniably magnificent. Elizabeth Taylor's Cleopatra is not a romantic figure waiting to be swept up by powerful men. She is a queen, a geopolitical strategist, and one of the most formidable intelligences in the ancient world. And Taylor plays every dimension of that with complete authority and extraordinary physical presence. The production design remains breathtaking to this day. The recreation of Alexandria, of Rome, of the great processional sequences, represents Hollywood craftsmanship at its absolute peak. At 4 hours, it demands your full and undivided attention. Give it that attention, and Cleopatra rewards you with one of the most genuinely spectacular cinematic experiences ever produced. 7th place, The Robe, 1953. 7th place goes to Henry Koster's The Robe, a film with a distinction that places it permanently in cinema history. Regardless of any critical ranking, It was the very first film ever released in CinemaScope widescreen format. The robe did not merely tell a compelling story set in ancient Rome. It literally changed the physical shape of what movies looked like forever. That is not a footnote. That is a revolution. Richard Burton stars as Marcellus Gallio, a Roman military tribune who, during the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, wins the robe of Christ in a dice game at the foot of the cross. From that moment, his life begins to unravel in ways he cannot explain or control, haunted by guilt, drawn toward the growing community of Christians in a Rome that is increasingly determined to destroy them. Burton's performance is simply exceptional. The brooding intelligence, the emotional complexity, the moral anguish of a man being pulled toward belief by forces larger than his cynicism, he brings every layer of it to the surface with an authority that reminds you why he was considered one of the great actors of his generation. Victor Mature provides strong, warm support as Demetrius. The film won Academy Awards for Best Costume Design and Best Art Direction and received a Best Picture nomination. As a piece of filmmaking history and as a genuinely moving human drama set in the ancient world, The Robe is essential. 6th place, Monty Python's Life of Brian, 1979. 6th place, I Need You to Trust Me on This One. Terry Jones's Monty Python's Life of Brian is one of the funniest films ever made, one of the most controversial films ever made, and this is the part that gets overlooked in every conversation about it, one of the most historically informed films ever made about Roman-occupied Judea in the 1st century AD. The Python team researched their subject with genuine rigor, and the result is a comedy that is simultaneously completely absurd and deeply lovingly accurate about the texture of daily life under Roman imperial rule. The film follows Brian, an ordinary and thoroughly well-meaning man, born in the stable next door to Jesus, who spends his entire life being catastrophically, hilariously mistaken for the Messiah. The Roman characters, Pontius Pilate, the centurions, the legions strutting through the streets of Jerusalem, are rendered with satirical precision that would make a classical historian both laugh and nod. The "What have the Romans ever done for us?" The scene contains more genuine historical insight about the real benefits of Roman imperial administration than a shelf full of academic textbooks, delivered at a pace and with a wit that those textbooks rarely manage. Life of Brian was banned in several countries on its release in 1979 and remains provocative to this day. It is also, without the slightest qualification, a masterpiece. 5th place, Rome, HBO series, 2005 to 2007. 5th place goes to a television series rather than a single film, and I am making this call with complete confidence and zero apologies. HBO's Rome, which ran across 2 seasons from 2005 to 2007, is simply too important, too extraordinary, and too massively influential on everything that followed it to be excluded from any serious conversation about the greatest ancient Rome stories ever told on screen. Created by John Milius, William J. MacDonald, and Bruno Heller, Rome dramatizes the fall of the Roman Republic and the birth of the empire through 2 interwoven narrative threads: the grand historical story of Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, Octavian, Cicero, Brutus, and Cleopatra, and the intimate personal story of 2 soldiers, Lucius Vorenus and Titus Pullo, whose lives intersect repeatedly with the great events of their age. Kevin McKidd and Ray Stevenson as Vorenus and Pullo are simply one of the greatest on-screen partnerships in television history. One, a man of rigid honor being slowly broken by a world that keeps betraying it. The other, a cheerful force of nature who survives everything by refusing to take anything too seriously. Polly Walker's Atia of the Julii is one of the great villainous creations of 21st century television. The streets of Rome in this series are dirty, dangerous, political, sensual, and completely alive in ways that no single film has ever quite achieved. It was canceled prematurely due to budget constraints before completing its planned 5-season arc, and that remains one of the great losses in the history of prestige television. 4th place, Spartacus, 1960. 4th place belongs to Stanley Kubrick's Spartacus, a film of genuine political courage, towering emotional ambition, and filmmaking craftsmanship that remains breathtaking more than 60 years after its release. Kirk Douglas stars as Spartacus, the Thracian gladiator who led one of history's most extraordinary slave revolts, raising an army of tens of thousands against the full military might of the Roman Republic, before being crushed with devastating, merciless efficiency by the legions of Marcus Licinius Crassus. Douglas, who produced the film as well as starred in it, made a decision during production that went far beyond cinema. He publicly credited blacklisted screenwriter Dalton Trumbo by his real name on the finished film. A direct and deliberate challenge to the McCarthy-era Hollywood blacklist that had destroyed careers and lives throughout the 1950s. That act of defiance helped bring one of the darkest chapters in American cultural history to an end. The film around that act is equally worthy of the moment. Laurence Olivier is electrifying as Crassus, cold and brilliant and absolutely terrifying. Gene Simmons, Charles Laughton, Tony Curtis, and Peter Ustinov surround Douglas with performances of extraordinary quality. The battle sequences are staggering in scale, and the "I am Spartacus" scene, that moment of collective defiance, of ordinary people choosing solidarity over survival, remains one of the most purely emotionally overwhelming sequences in the history of the medium. Spartacus is not just a great Roman epic. It is a great film about what human beings owe each other. Third place, Gladiator, 2000. Third place, and if you have spent any time with this channel at all, you already knew Gladiator was going to be in the top 3. Ridley Scott's 2000 epic is the film that single-handedly dragged a genre that had been dormant for nearly 4 decades back into the mainstream, proving to an entirely new generation of moviegoers that ancient Rome, told with ambition and genuine emotional intelligence, could still fill seats, win awards, and make grown adults cry in a multiplex. Russell Crowe delivers a powerful, Oscar-winning performance as Maximus Decimus Meridius, Roman general, devoted father, reluctant slave, and eventual gladiator, a man stripped of everything he loves by the corrupt and jealous Emperor Commodus, played with extraordinary psychological complexity by Joaquin Phoenix. Phoenix's Commodus is not simply a villain. He is something more interesting and more disturbing, a deeply damaged man who craves love and respect that he has never been able to earn, and who has chosen destruction as his response to that failure. The dynamic between Crowe and Phoenix gives Gladiator its dramatic spine, and Hans Zimmer and Lisa Gerrard's haunting, ancient-feeling score gives it its soul. Are you not entertained? 2,000 years of Roman history, 5 Academy Awards including Best Picture and Best Actor, and a legacy that reshaped historical epic filmmaking for the decade that followed. Yes, Maximus, we are very much entertained. Second place, Ben-Hur, 1959. Second place, take a moment, because Ben-Hur is not simply a great film. It is one of the defining achievements in the entire history of the medium, a work of such staggering ambition, such emotional depth, and such technical mastery that it remains overwhelming even now, 65 years after its release. William Wyler's Ben-Hur follows Judah Ben-Hur, a Jewish prince played by Charlton Heston, in the defining performance of one of Hollywood's most iconic careers, who is betrayed by his childhood Roman friend Messala, falsely condemned as a traitor, enslaved, sent to the galleys, and forced to rebuild his life from absolute nothing before returning to Jerusalem to confront his past. The film spans decades, crosses continents, and encompasses personal betrayal, galley warfare, the rise of early Christianity, and the most spectacular action sequence in the history of cinema, the chariot race. It runs nearly 10 minutes. It took 3 months to film. The set covered 18 acres of Italian countryside, real horses, real chariots, real danger, real dust, real speed. Coordinated by the legendary stuntman Yakima Canutt and second unit director Andrew Martin, it is a sequence of such pure, visceral, heart-stopping cinema that it makes your pulse race even on repeated viewings when you know every beat of what is coming. No digital effects, no safety nets, just craft, courage, and an absolute commitment to making the audience feel every hoofbeat. Ben-Hur won 11 Academy Awards, a record it held for 40 years, and still shares with only 2 other films. It is a film about betrayal and survival, about hatred and forgiveness, about what it costs a human being to carry rage across decades, and what it feels like to finally, mercifully set it down. It is a towering achievement that time has not diminished by a single frame. First place, The Passion of the Christ, 2004. And in first place is Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, set entirely in the final 12 hours of Jesus of Nazareth's life under Roman authority. This is the most raw, the most uncompromising, and the most viscerally affecting portrayal of Roman power and brutality ever committed to film. Gibson's decisions were genuinely radical. The entire film is performed in Latin and Aramaic, with subtitles a level of linguistic authenticity no other ancient Rome production has ever attempted at this scale. Jim Caviezel plays Jesus with a physical and spiritual commitment that is almost painful to witness. The Roman soldiers, their armor, their language, their casual bureaucratic cruelty are depicted with a historical honesty that strips away 2,000 years of comfortable distance and forces you to confront what Roman imperial justice actually looked like for those at the absolute bottom of its power structure. Controversial on release, it earned over $600 million worldwide on a $30 million budget. Critics were divided, audiences were overwhelmed. Whether you approach it as an act of faith, a historical document, or purely as cinema, The Passion of the Christ makes ancient Rome feel not like history, but like something happening right now. It is ferocious, uncompromising, and the greatest ancient Rome film ever made. I'm Max. This has been Top Movies. Give this video a thumbs up, subscribe for more countdowns, and let me know in the comments, did The Passion of the Christ deserve the top spot? I want every opinion. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.